المباركة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الأول قبل الإنشاء والإحياء والآخر بعد فناء الأشياء، العليم الذي لا ينسى من ذكره ولا ينقص من شكره ولا يخيب من دعاه ولا يقطع رجاء من رجاه. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، خاتم النبيين، حبيب قلوبنا طبيب نفوسنا، أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد صلى الله عليه وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. اللهم صل على محمد. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الشيطان لكم عدوا فاتخذوه عدوا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصاب نبي أبي عبد الله الحسين عليه السلام. Begin as usual by offering our condolences to the Imam of our time and to the mu'mineen all around the world as we commemorate the tragedy of Ashra in Karbala. In our theme titled Maximizing the Dunya or the Akhirah, we have introduced a number of keys to help us achieve this goal. We began by talking about the importance of punctuality and the dangers of procrastination. We then moved on to the idea of progress and the dangers of stagnation. We discussed the importance of continuous learning, especially when it comes to the fundamentals of our faith, and that's where we introduced the different levels of Tawheed in terms of beliefs, in our actions, and our inner states. We then moved on to the idea of sabr and how we need to make sure that we are active, persevere. Sabr is not something that is passive, but rather it is something that is very active. Then yesterday we introduced the idea that sabr not just individually but team, and so this journey that we take alone, a journey of teamwork. We how Islam sees teamwork as something very important. We're supposed to help each other, give each other energy, complement, look into each other's strengths and weaknesses, and take advantage of that as we perform tasks. Benefits of teamwork. The first being synergy, where the output of a team is more than just the sum of its parts. We also saw how teamwork is an opportunity for us to learn from each other and correct each other and learn from our mistakes. Finally, we said that teamwork needs to start at home and then progress onto the community, and there are times when we need to work on our communication and involve people for consultation. The key that we introduced today is recognizing the forces that stop us on this journey, recognizing forces that may become obstructions for us or obstacles for us as we are trying to achieve this goal. Now, sometimes when we are pursuing this journey, we are a little bit naive. We think that we can just go on this journey, and sometimes I'll make mistakes, but I will pick myself up again. not realizing that there are active forces that are actually trying to stop me from going on this journey. So sometimes I fall into the trap of ghafla. Ghafla meaning that I am unaware, I am oblivious of the fact that sometimes there even is an opposing force, that there is a negative force against me. Sometimes I may recognize that there is a force that is against me, but I won't know who or what it is. Sometimes I may know who it is, but I won't know how it is working against me and what the strategies being used against me are. Sometimes I have all of this awareness, but I take it lightly. I don't see this force as something serious. And when I take it lightly, I fall into the trap of whatever strategies and plans are being made against me. I would like to recall the evening of the 26th of Rajab, 60 AH. If you remember, Imam Hussein was summoned by the governor of Medina, Walid bin Utbah, to give allegiance to Yazid after Muawiyah had died. And Imam Hussein Islam had this encounter with Walid. And one of the lines he said, I want to bring back to your attention, about why he is not giving bay'ah to Yazid. He says, Yazidun rajulun fasiq, sha'rin, qatilun nafs al-muharrama, mu'linun bil-fisq. Yazid is a man who transgressed God's limits. He is a of alcohol. Innocent people, somebody a sinner. And then he says, وَمِثْلِ لَا يُبَايَعُ. Somebody like me cannot give bay'ah to somebody like him. What happens is the next day he meets Imam Hussein alayhi salam, encounters Marwan, still trying to persuade him to do the bay'ah of Yazid. And he is telling him it will be good for your dunya and for your akhirah. But Imam's reply to one is that if the ummah gets a leader like Yazid, then Islam is finished. He says, وَعَلَى الْإِسْلَامِ السَّلَامِ. And so, again, the Imam is recognizing that somebody like Yazid cannot obstruction to progress of this ummah. Finally, when he is about to leave Medina, and his brother Muhammad bin Hanafiya, he is persuading him not to go towards Kufa. There is danger, stay here. But the Imam replies, he says to him, oh my brother, even if the world, I would never give allegiance to Yazid. Now what does this tell us? This tells the words of Imam Hussein to the governor, Marwan, and Muhammad bin Hanafiya. They show us that the Imam is well aware who the opponent is right now. The opponent is Yazid and what his characteristics are. Let's go a bit further back in time. When we look at the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam and the event of Saqifa, never do we see Imam Ali rising up like this. When the event of Saqifa takes place, it was very painful for Amir al-Mu'mineen. In Nahj al-Balagha, if you read, I think it's the third sermon, he talks explicitly about how painful it was and how the rights were usurped, etc., etc. But he doesn't talk like Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He doesn't talk about rising up. Even when Abu Sufyan comes to him and says to him, your rights have been usurped, let us go and rise up, Imam sees right through his words and he knows that this person is after the detriment of Islam. If we are to rise up at these initial stages of Islam, then Islam will be finished. Nobody will remain. We go to the time of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. Imam Hassan is facing Muawiyah. But again, he doesn't rise up against him straight away. He doesn't challenge him straight away. Instead, he writes letters to him. Why is this? He does this because Muawiyah is not like Yazid, where he is an open sinner. Muawiyah is very cunning. He is claiming the right to Khilafah by being an honest person, a rightful person. And so the Imam is taking this opportunity to start exposing Muawiyah and let the people see who he is. And so he writes letters to him. And it's only when the peace treaty is signed and Muawiyah basically puts the peace treaty under his feet and breaks every single part of that peace treaty that the people realize that this is not somebody who we thought that he was. But Imam Hussein doesn't do this. Imam Hussein doesn't give Yazid any time. Why? Because Yazid doesn't need to be exposed. Yazid is exposing himself anyway. And so the Imam says to the people that somebody like me cannot do bay'ah to somebody like this. When it is in this situation, the strategy is different. The basira that the Imam has is the same as all the other Imams. They're trying to achieve the same goal, but the methodology that they're using is different. Everybody has recognized what the opposing force of that time is and how best to deal with it. Inshallah, today what we want to do is introduce this idea of recognizing that which are the forces against us and look into the ways that Islam teaches us to resist against these forces. If you're with me, then please recite the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now, if I were to ask you, who is our biggest enemy? Our biggest enemy. I'm sure most people are thinking, it's shaitan. Shaitan is our biggest enemy. Why else would you recite that verse at the beginning of the Majlis, right? But we go to the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. Rasulullah is telling us, أَعْدَى عَدُوِّكْ نَفْسُكَ الَّتِي بَيْنَ جَنْبَيْكَ. Your biggest opponent is this very nafs that is between your two sides. It is an inward enemy. It's not the external enemy. If you remember, there is a time when the Muslims have gone for jihad. They've gone far to take part in a certain battle against the kuffar, and they are returning back. And the Prophet greets them and he says, Marhaban, congratulations, welcome. Congratulations to those who have successfully completed al-jihad al-asghar, and remains for them al-jihad al-akbar. Congratulations to those of you who have completed the smaller struggle, but the bigger fight is still waiting for you. You can imagine the faces of these people. We have just gone out ready to sacrifice our lives away from our home for days, if not weeks, if not months, and we're coming back and you're telling us that this was just a smaller struggle? What is this bigger struggle? And the Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi replies to them saying that it is al-jihadun nafs, the struggle against one's own self. Telling them basically that success in this world is measured by how much we are in control of our own selves, in control of our own nafs. If we look at Surah An-Nazi'at, this concept, this idea is brought there for us. In the Quran it says, فَأَمَّا مَنْ طَغَى وَآثَرَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا فَإِنَّ الْجَحِيمَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. As for him who has been rebellious and he has preferred the worldly life, his refuge will be the hellfire. وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. But as for him who has feared the station of his Lord and he has prohibited his nafs from following its base desires, then his refuge will indeed be the paradise. Success is being measured here by the control of the nafs and going against the desires. Now our favorite surah also has an indication of this, which is hidden in there. Surah Al-Asr, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Wal-Asr innal insana lafi khusr. There is a secret in here. Allah is saying, I swear by time. We talked about Asr and how it's the squeezing, and this is the time that is running out. But then he is saying it is the human being that is in loss. There must be something about the human being which is why the default for him is loss. And if we look into this further, we see that we have to recognize who we are. If we don't recognize who we are, then trying to control ourselves and trying to go on this path towards our goal becomes very difficult. And that's why we have this famous phrase of the Urafa that says, "Man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa rabba." And there's two interpretations of this, with faqad and without faqad. Sometimes it is saying the one who recognizes himself will recognize his Lord. And sometimes it is saying the one who has recognized his self has already recognized his Lord. That's where the faqad comes in. The first one is telling us that if we recognize ourselves, then basically we have come to the realization that we're a two-dimensional being. We have the physical being, we have the physical dimension, and we have the spiritual, the non-material dimension. And if we are to accept something non-material about our own existence, the fact that there is something non-material, there's many proofs when you go into aqaid of how to prove that we have a soul. There are many proofs there. But as soon as we even have the basic proof that there is something within us that is non-material, it allows us to come to this conclusion that there may be other things non-material. It's not the case that there are only material things in existence. If we have identified one non-material thing, we may be able to identify other ones, and it leads us to our Lord. The second one, when we have that he has already recognized his Lord, is a bit more complicated. It requires a bit more tafsir, so we're not going to go into the details of that, but it suffices to say that it is a part and parcel of our journey, that if we recognize ourselves, then we will be able to recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, unfortunately, as we have mentioned, materialism in the society today is taking us somewhere else. It is trying to prevent us from recognizing the true reality of ourselves, and it is pushing us only into the material realm of recognizing, giving us the identity of our beauty, our physical bodies, the way we possess, the position that we have. All of these are the identities that are to us. And virtual reality, as we see, one step further. In virtual reality, we have to come to that this isn't real. Our body is more real than this. And then come to our bodies, then we say, oh, this isn't real me. It is the soul that is the real me. What we have to realize, what are the different faculties of the soul? And this is a science that is called ilmun nafs, to try and recognize what is the philosophy behind our. Now, we come across different words in Islam, in the Quran. Sometimes Allah talks to us about nafs, sometimes He talks to us about ruh. And what is the between the two is something that is studied. Just a quick gem over here to give. Some say that the ruh is different to the ruh is the overall spirit that we have, and the nafs is determining which stage the ruh is at. And that's why we have different names. Nafs al-ammara, we have nafs al-lawwam, nafs al-mutma'inna. All of these are stages of the ruh that are given the name nafs. But there's an interesting relationship between nafs and ruh. Because when you look at the Arabic words, for example, you see that the word ruh comes from the same root as rih. Rih meaning the wind. Whereas the nafs comes from the same root as nafas. Nafas meaning a breath. When you breathe, it is called nafas. And so when we see in the Quran, وَإِذَا سَوَّيْتُهُ فَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي, and when I proportioned him, meaning the human being, I blew into him my spirit, it is telling us that what we have inside us is something from the ruh of Allah. The relationship of the nafs to the ruh is very similar to the relationship between the nafas and the rih. Just like that breath, we say a breath of fresh air. That breath of fresh air comes from the overall wind. Obviously, this is in a physical way. But in a non-physical way, there is some sort of relationship between the nafs that we have, which is, we're restricted by language, so we say a small version of the ruh, but obviously it is not something that is a physical thing, like something has been taken out of Allah and placed within us. But what is it that determines how the nafs functions? When we go into ilmun nafs, we are told that there are three very important faculties that the nafs has. And these faculties determine our action as a result. We have the faculty of the aql, the intellect. We have the faculty of ghadab, anger. And we have the faculty of shahwa, which is our base desires. And each of them has a role to play. If we look at our base desires, the inclinations that we have are required for us to survive, to eat, procreate, all of these need a desire for us to be inclined towards that so that we can continue living in this world. Ghadab, on the other hand, is the opposite. It's not the attractive force, what we are inclined to, but it's the repelling force. When we get angry on somebody or something, we are trying to ward off some danger, some harm away from ourselves. And that is also required for our survival. So that is the faculty of ghadab. But then we also have the faculty of the intellect. And the intellect is supposed to be in charge. If we again look at the word aql, where does the aql come from? If we look at the root of this word and the concept behind it, it will give us an idea of what the intellect is supposed to be used for. The word aql comes from the idea of aqila. In Arabic, the word aqila is used to tie something to something else. So for example, when in the old days they were riding the horses and the camels and they dismount, they would tie the camel to the tree. And that would be the word aqila. Now what happens when that camel or the horse is tied to the tree? When it tries to run away, its radius of movement is now limited. It can't run away. It can move only around that tree. That is exactly the function of the aql. The function of the aql is to keep all the faculties in check. It is trying to make sure that the ghadab doesn't escape and go beyond control. Shahwa doesn't escape and go to extremes. It moderates it so that there is a right balance between them. So if we take, for example, the idea of bravery, we are all seeing bravery as something that is a virtue. It is something that we see as something good that we should be inclining ourselves towards. But you see, there's two extremes. Sometimes there is somebody who has no bravery and he is a coward. Sometimes somebody is not brave, we call him foolhardy. He tries to do things even though there's no danger. He puts himself in danger for no reason. It's the aql's job to try and make sure that it doesn't go into any of these extremes. The nafs is kept within that certain radius and managed and controlled by the aql. Now, if we look at why the human being has been created and the position of the human being, we see that the human being has a potential to reach higher than the angels, but it has also got the potential to go lower than the animals. If we look in the Quran at the first stage, in the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, when Allah is declaring to the angels that He is about to create Adam alayhi salam, He says, وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. And the Mufassirin tell us that there is something very special about the human being, and we know this because never in any other situation has Allah declared in advance, oh, I am going to create the earth, I am going to create the trees. No, the announcement is being made to show something grand is happening there. Your Lord, and remember when your Lord told the angels that I am a placer on this earth of a representative. I am placing on this earth a representative. And what is their reply? قَالُوا أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ. Are you going to place somebody on the earth as your representative who is going to shed blood and is going to cause corruption, while it is the case that نَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. We are the ones who are glorifying you. We are the ones who have recognized you. What does Allah say to them? إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. I know something about this creature that you do not know. In other words, Allah is saying that this creature is somebody who is very special. And we talk about the idea of وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. Allah has given him karama. Karama is of two types. When Allah is saying that the human being has been given nobility and dignity and he is a kareem creation. Not kareem. Allah is kareem, but he is somebody that has been given the karama. It is talking in terms of his potential. It is not like just by being a human being, suddenly we are worthy of praise. No. Rather, it is the potential that we have and what we do with that potential that gives us the real karama. And that is why when the angels are being commanded to prostrate, It's not when the human being is still in the bodily form. It's when he says, I have breathed into him my spirit. When the soul is present, that's when they have to do sajda to the human being, indicating that he has the potential to go very high. On the other hand, when we look at Surah At-Teen, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ, we have created man in the best of positions, in the best of forms, referring to our potential. But sometimes, unfortunately, the default is we fall down. ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. He goes worse than angels, worse than animals. أُولَٰئِكَ كَالْأَنْعَامِ بَلْ هُمْ أَضَلُّ. They are like the cattle, rather they are even more straying. Why is Allah saying they're even more straying? Because when you look at the angels, we can go higher than them because they don't have the shahwa, they don't have the ghadab, they don't have this opposing force that they have to overcome in order to reach higher levels. But when you look at the animals, they don't have the aql. And so the human being having all of these, he can be argued against in both ways. He can be told, you had the shahwa and the ghadab and still you obeyed and made sure your aql was in control, and so you're higher than the angels. Or he can be told, you had the aql but still you submitted to the shahwa and the ghadab, which the animals don't have the aql, and so you are lower than the animals as well. It is the job of the aql now to keep these all in check. What happens when the aql loses control? When the aql loses control and either one of the shahwa or the ghadab takes over, this is that stage of the nafs which is called nafsul ammara. It is the nafs that commands you to do evil. In the Quran it even says in Surah Yusuf, إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ. The nafs is something, if you look at the form, it's not just it gives you a few commands. No, it's constantly commanding you towards evil. Controlling our shahwa and our ghadab is where our success lies. We see one of the hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam where he says to us, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. أشجع الناس من غلب الجهل بالعلم وقابل الغضب بالحلم. The bravest of people is the one who manages to overcome his ignorance with knowledge and manages to overcome his anger with tolerance, with hilm. And like we said, اهدنا الصراط المستقيم, we ask to be put onto the right path, but the path is identified by those who have traversed the path. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم. Imam Ali alayhi salam is not saying this out of just from the point of view of theory. He has gone through this. And where do we see this? We see this in the third battle of Islam, the third major battle. We had Battle of Badr. In Battle of Badr, we're told 313 Muslims against about 1,000. Then we had the Battle of Uhud, where the Muslims are now 1,000, but the enemies are 3,000. Then we have the Battle of Khandaq, or the Battle of Ahzab. We're told the Muslims are now 3,000, but the enemies now, all the parties have come together, and there are 10,000. And unlike Badr and Uhud, the battle is going to take place in Medina itself. The Jews, the Quraysh, they have all combined and they're marching towards Medina. And the Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, he asks his companion, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, Salman al-Farsi, for a strategy for protecting Medina. And the strategy is to build or to dig a khandaq, a trench around the outskirts of Medina to prevent the enemy from coming over. But what do we see? After a few days of fighting, one of the bravest warriors that the enemy have, by the name of Amr bin Abdawid, he manages to find a place where the trench is a bit shorter, narrower, and he crosses over and he challenges the Muslims to a fight. Who is the only one that responds all three times? Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. When he comes, Amr doesn't want to fight him. He says, I knew your father Abu Talib. I can't fight you because he was somebody that was close to him, respected him, whatever it was. He comes with an excuse. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, no, you are known to give your enemy 3 options in battle. Are you ready to give me the options? He said, yes. He was known to always accept one of three options that the opponent poses. He says, I'll give you three options. Number one, you accept Islam. Number two, go back to where you came from. Number three, you come down off your horse and you fight me. Because Imam Ali was on foot. He's not going to accept Islam. It's too embarrassing to go back now. And so he comes down off his horse and the fight starts. The fight is fierce. Eventually, what do we see? Imam Ali alayhi salam is standing over the body of Amr, about to kill him. And what does he do? He spits at the blessed face of Amir al-Mu'mineen. This is where any one of us, the ghadab would have kicked in. But we see this is practice. He's not a man of words. Steps away and he goes back, and afterwards he finishes him off. And when he is asked, why is it that you stepped away? He says, I did not want to kill him out of my own spite. I needed to kill him because it was for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is why we are told strike that he struck on that day is the equivalent of the thaqalain, the ibadah of all of the human beings and all of the jinn. Because this is a man of practice, that every action of his, even though we may have been able to replicate that strike, we would not have been able to replicate where the strike came from. Please recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So the nafs begins by commanding us to do evil things, but it doesn't stop there now. Sometimes we give in and we do the evil thing, don't we? We make the mistake and we fall down. You think the nafs is going to keep quiet? The nafs reaches another stage now. And it's known as an-nafs al-musawwila. It does what is called tasweel. It tries to justify what we have done. Where do we see this in the Quran? If you remember when the brothers of Yusuf, they have taken him and they wanted to kill him, but one of the brothers tells them, no, you shouldn't do this. If you want to do anything, put him in the well. And then they slaughter one of the sheep. They put the blood of that sheep onto the shirt of Yusuf, and they bring it back to their father with these crocodile tears, faking their tears and crying and saying, oh, the wolf came and ate them. What is the response of Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam? He says, بَلْ سَوَّلَتْ لَكُمْ أَنفُسُكُمْ أَمْرًا. Your souls have justified what you have done. When we make mistakes, the soul starts speaking out because the ego is very strong. It doesn't want to submit to the fact that it's done a mistake. So sometimes we end up lying to each other. And we go home and we think, a voice is telling us, I shouldn't have said that, right? But then another voice comes and takes over. And says, no, you had to. I mean, it was very important. It was something that you had to protect the people from. We do this when backbiting as well, right? And we kid ourselves even before we start backbiting. We say, look, I'm not backbiting, but, and I start backbiting, okay? So the soul tries to say, no, this was necessary. It was something that I had to do. It was the only thing to do, okay? Other examples, we can go for Majlis or we don't. I'm feeling a bit lazy. I stay at home and then the soul feels a bit irritated. You should have gone to Majlis. But then the voice comes back again. No. Work that you are doing, it's more important, it is for the community, and it tries to justify why you haven't gone to the Majlis. Sometimes we fall into the trap of our mobile phones. Not sometimes, a lot of the time, right? We've had a busy hour, I would say a busy day, maybe 10 years back. We've had a busy hour when we haven't touched the phone because that's all we last. And then we look and we have 100 messages. And I have to read every single one of these messages in all of the groups that I'm subscribed in, because maybe there's something really important there that I'm going to miss if I don't read all of my messages. And so the soul justifies that I spend an hour checking my WhatsApp just because I spent an hour of not having touched it. Students, you might have gone through this, right? You have a really late night. You know it's going to be difficult for you to wake up in the morning to go to class. And that's what happens. You wake up late and you've missed the class. Or you haven't missed the class, but you feel too tired now to rush into class and you skip the first class. And then the soul comes and starts saying to yourself, you know what? If I'm so tired, I wouldn't have understood anything anyway. It was better that I just caught up on my sleep. So you justify missing your class. Sometimes it's about catching up with your parents. How many of us are living away from our parents? A whole week goes by, a whole month goes by, and I haven't called my parents to check up on how they are doing. But the soul is constantly saying, no, you're busy, you're doing good things, they'll understand. No, this isn't something to justify. The parents, after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first thing He says after the obedience to Allah is that we should be doing good to our parents. We can't justify these things. Sometimes we let our hair grow for months on end. I haven't had time, I've been too busy to have a haircut. As parents, we also fall into one of two extremes where the soul starts justifying things to us. We've had a hard day at work. We come back very irritated. None of the clients were cooperating. The employees were not on our side. They weren't fulfilling their duties. It's been a long day. You come home. Your child comes and does something very innocent, like he bumps into you by mistake or makes some sort of mistake. And suddenly you lash out at him, trying to put all the anger that you've been developing over the day onto this poor child. And then the soul comes and says, no, look, if I as the father am not going to discipline my child, then who is going to do it? And so we start justifying. Or go on to the other extreme, and we go into the trap of unparenting, where we feel we are so busy at work, in community work, volunteering, and we leave the child alone. We're not spending time with the child, not at home and not outside. In the home, I have no idea what he is watching on TV, what he is surfing the net for, which apps he has downloaded. I still have time, inshallah, when he grows up, I'll spend more time with him. When he goes outside, this is he or she. When he goes outside, I don't know who his friend circle is. I don't know where he's hanging out. I don't know what influences are coming onto him. It is time that we stop justifying ourselves when we know what the right things are to do. It is time that we build these relationships with our children where the child finds us as their best friend. We are told that when the child is very young, the child sees the parent as their Rabb. We discussed what the Rabb is. The Rabb is the one that takes you on the journey, the one who provides for you. They're too young to realize that what Allah actually is. And so they see that their rizq is coming from the parent. If we are not able to win them over and become close to them at a young age, when they enter their teens, it's going to be too late. They're not going to open up to us. They're not going to try and make sure that they spill out their problems, try and seek solutions from your experience, because you were never there for them. Why should they trust in you? They've been spending time with a whole load of other people, and so they will trust them. Those are the people that they are going to go after. So this was the position of the nafs. The main opposing force that we have is our own nafs. What is another opposing force that is stopping us from going on this journey? We've already mentioned it, and that is shaitan. In the verse that I recited, Allah says to us, Inna shaytana lakum aduwan fattakhidhuhu aduwa. Verily, shaitan is an enemy for all of you. So take him as an enemy. Take him as an enemy. Do we take him as an enemy? Do we take him seriously? In another verse it says, إِنَّهُ يَرَاكُمْ هُوَ وَقَبِيلُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا تَرَوْنَهُمْ. He and his armies, they see you from a position that you do not see him. Now what is the first thing? Be honest. What is the first thing that comes to mind when I say shaitan? What do we think of him as? We think of him as a ghost. Or Manchester United's red devil, right, holding the fork. Why do we have this picture? You may not like to admit it, but this is a form of desensitization. What do I mean? When we see movies, cartoons, and all of these things that depict anything that is non-material in a material way, when we think of the likes of angels, shaitan, the jinn, we think of them as material. Unfortunately, because we are so enveloped in a materialistic society, anything that is non-material is hard for us to digest. And so, whenever we think of these things, like miracles, for example, miracles actually took place. Yeah, to a certain extent, we will accept this. But we will try and think of them in a material way. When Musa cast that staff down and the sea opened, what actually happened? Yes, there may be a cause and effect system, but the fact that there is something called a miracle is something that is a bit far-fetched for us. It's not easy for us to accept. When Allah talks in the Quran about magic, that there was something called magic. At the time of Prophet Musa, there was this phenomenon called magic. But for us, magic isn't so real anymore. Black magic, we hear these words, we think of it mainly as trickery, right? What we see on the TV shows, that they're, putting your attention somewhere else and doing something else in the background. But no, these things are actually real. Miracles are actually real. Do we take shaitan as an active force against us? When we wake up in the morning, do we have this thought, just like Allah, the Ahlul Bayt, the angels are helping us to take us on the journey, be careful. There is an active force, shaitan, who is against us. But no, when we watch all of these things and we're engrossed in Hollywood and Bollywood, all our thoughts become material. And it's the same thing for other things, right? It's not non-material things, even things. It governs. They're trying to. So there was a time when enemies of Hollywood were all of them, because they're brainwashing people to say these are. Then a time came when the enemies are saying Allahu Akbar. All of the enemies in the movies have become Muslim, washing against. But it's not only that. It's even when we see how are we being sensitized when it comes to oppression. Today we see a movie where there is so much violence and so much oppression going on in that movie. I finish the movie and change the channel and I see the oppression that is going on in the world today. I have become desensitized now. For me, it's just another one of those things that I saw before. I don't feel that sympathy anymore. I don't feel that pain that somebody is going through, because I'm so used to seeing these things in a fictitious way that when it's real, I see it as fictitious. Shaitan is the same thing. Interestingly, so this actually happened to me personally. It wasn't to do with crimes, it was to do with natural disasters. You see a movie which is to do with the flooding and everything. The next day, there was actually a flood. And you had to think twice, like, this is real now. People are dying over here. It's not just some movie that is going on. And so we need to make sure that we take him seriously, and it's not just a normal thing. Even the Prophet ﷺ is told to take protection and seek protection from shaitan. وَقُلْ رَبِّ أَعُوذُ بِكَ مِنْ هَمَزَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ, and say, my Lord, I seek your protection from the promptings of the devils, from the insinuations and the whisperings of the shaitan. وَأَعُوذُ بِكَ رَبِّ أَنْ يَحْضُرُونَ, and I seek your protection, my Lord, from their presence near me. They're real. They're here. They can see you from where you do not see them. Have you ever wondered why, when we are told to recite Quran, we're told to say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim? Why? Quran, I'm going to something so noble. Why am I seeking protection from shaitan? Because shaitan is not just going to stop and say, oh, look, he's doing a good deed. Now up and step away. Put effort in. My salah, there are two places told specifically from shaitan. One is before Salah, and one is where? Before we start with the Bismillah of Surah Al-Hamd in the first rak'ah, we're told it's mustahab. We're seeking protection from shaitan, not to convert. Is being told. Finally, what is the opposing force? The third opposing force we naive is people themselves. Sometimes there are bad people in this earth, and we have to come to terms with that. Not everybody is good. In the Quran, Allah tells us, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَا لِكُلِّ نَبِيٍّ عَدُوًّا شَيَاطِينَ الْإِنسِ وَالْجِنِّ. For every prophet in the form of shayateen. Shayateen take, the first one is ins, the second one is jinn, the human and the jinn. One's role is to do waswasa, try and misguide you and come off the path. What happens when you obey shaitan? What happens when you actually succumb to him? What happens is that you become one of him. What happens is that now shaitan is to you to take on his role. Very scary from Nahjul Balagha in sermon number 7. I'll quote this for you. When he's talking about these people, he says, they have taken shaitan as the controller for their affairs, and he adopted them as partners. He has laid eggs, hatched them in their hearts, and crawled onto their laps until he sees through their eyes and he speaks through their tongues. And thus does he lead them to commit mistakes and glamorize foolish deeds to them. This wheel, the justification, speaking lies with his tongue. And so, if to shaitan, we become the shaitan. Now we know who these people are. We know them in history. We know them as Yazid, Muawiyah, Namrud, Fir'aun. But have we ever questioned who are the Yazids of today? Have we ever questioned who are the people who are causing devastation on this earth, committing every type of sin, not against Islam, but against the humanity, in public, justifying it, calling us reform? Who are the Muawiyahs of today? What was Muawiyah's tactic? Muawiyah's tactic was so strong that the people who he had influence over would come to the imams and start abusing them and start accusing them of things. And only after encountering the imam, they realized how mistaken they were. Muawiyah was a mastermind at the soft war. He had control over the media. What do we mean by control over the media? It means his was the only voice that is heard. The media, when it's in control, that is the voice that we hear. We have to wake up to this. When we say, for example, Hollywood is not entertainment, but it is education. I brought the quote for you today, right? This is from Walt Disney. He says, I think of a child's mind as a blank book. During the first years of his life, much will be written on these pages. The quality of that writing will affect his life profoundly. So we have to be extremely careful that this media, be it in the form of news, be it in the form of animations, be it in the form of movies, we are aware. Because the more we start becoming relaxed, our beliefs start getting influenced. If our beliefs start getting influenced, our values start getting influenced. If our values start getting influenced, our actions start getting influenced. Keep this in mind and think about it. Beliefs, values, actions. This is the path that it is going to take us. And this is not just Muawiyah who started this off, by the way. Yeah? You can see this in the time of Fir'aun. When Prophet Musa comes to him, what does he say? His only request or claim is, I need to take Bani Israel out from Egypt. But what does Fir'aun tell his people? He says, this man wants to take you away from his land with his magic. Musa never wanted the land. Musa never wanted to expel any of the people who were living there. He just wanted to take Bani Israel. But Fir'aun had a monopoly of the media. This was the only voice that the people would hear, and so that's why they would believe and obey him. What are these subliminal messages that could come to us through these movies? These beliefs, these values. The first is akhlaq. You see, especially in the Western films, the superheroes that come out to be superheroes, they start off by being the most foul people. with the most pathetic akhlaq. But it is these people who suddenly rise because some spider bites them or something like that, and by chance they have become the heroes. It starts influencing our akhlaq as well. We might have been in this situation when we were young, where we've watched something where there is so much foul language and so much disrespect to parents that suddenly when my father or mother says something to me, I retaliate back and say something, which afterwards I think to myself and say, like, I wouldn't have normally said this. If you've not been on that side, maybe you've been on the other side where it happened to you. Your child says something which he doesn't normally say. This is because subconsciously this desensitization is happening and this influence is happening. A lot of the movies are talking about rebelliousness, about fighting out, breaking out, disobeying. This is being incorporated into the lives of our children. We talked about who is the enemy. We talked about relationships. Sometimes we see where movies and the animations that our children are seeing, they're allowing certain types of relationships to happen. Subconsciously, they're feeling that it is okay. A child is too young to even be told the truth at that age. You know, we say that it's okay. We will tell them what is right. At the age of 4 or 5, you can't talk to them about these things. The Islamic point of view is to keep them hidden from kind of things. There are so many that we are given as parents of how to make sure that even there is intimacy between a husband and wife, the child is kept away from this. But if the child is exposed to these other things, we're not even in a position now to come and tell them the truth anymore, because this is not what Islam's strategy is. Sometimes it is talking about the value of a woman, and what we see in the movies, we talked about the Barbie movie, for example. Sometimes it is some certain values, like the idea of crying. When we look into the movies, especially on the Western side, the idea of somebody crying is seen as something very negative. It shows weakness. But when we get influenced by this, it starts affecting our children when it comes to Muharram then. And now the idea of crying for Imam Hussein becomes a little bit harder, because the thing that's gone into their minds is that crying is a sense of weakness. And so our conclusion is that our biggest force that is against us is our nafs, but alongside the nafs we have the shaitan, both in the form of the jinn as well as the human being. Very quickly, how is it that we can resist these three forces? The first one is the nafs. How do we make sure that we are resisting against the nafs? We have a hadith from Imam Kadhim alayhi salam, where he says to us, لَيْسَ مِنَّا مَنْ لَمْ يُحَاسِبْ نَفْسَهُ فِي كُلِّ يَوْمٍ. He is not from us the one who does not take account for himself every day. We talked about the idea of muraqabah and muhasibah. These are the keys that the urafa give to us, the ulama of akhlaq give to us in order to make spiritual progress. We need to be watching over ourselves and then perform muhasibah at the end of the day. Take account of ourselves. The Imam goes into detail. How is it that we take account? What we have to do is that we need to picture what happened during that day and go through it step by step. And it's not easy. It will come with practice for sure. But we need to try. We go through it and we see where are the things that I did which were good, where are the things that I did which were evil. If I did something good, I ask Allah, I thank Him first for giving me the tawfiq of doing that thing that was good, and I ask Him to give me the strength to continue doing that good act. On the other side, if I come across something that I did which was bad, I seek forgiveness from Allah. And I make a commitment to say, tomorrow I'm going to try not to do this thing. You see, this is one of the ways the ulama tell us. It's a very comprehensive way. Why? Because there is another path that some people do advocate, and that is that you pick on a particular trait and you practice, for example, have a habit of lying, you try and spend 3 months without lying. But what you see from this particular methodology that is being advocated by the ulama of akhlaq and arafa is a more comprehensive one. It's not picking one trait, it's looking at it in a very general way. You yourself analyze yourself. If somebody else were to tell you, oh, you did this bad deed, the ego won't let you change as quickly. But when you see it yourself and you take account for yourself, it'll be easier for you. And so every night we need to do this, inshallah, that we are taking account of ourselves. Can I take a break? We said the world is a swimming pool, right? You stop paddling and you sing. Can I take a break? Allah tells us in the Quran, وَمَنْ يَعْشُ عَنْ ذِكْرِ الرَّحْمَنِ نُقَيِّضْ لَهُ شَيْطَانًا فَهُوَ لَهُ قَرِينٌ. Whoever turns a blind eye to the remembrance of Allah. When we say the remembrance of Allah, this is not just the dhikr that we utter by the tongue. This is remembrance in action. This is talking about whether I am keeping Allah in front or not. Is He the one that I'm for or not? If we turn a blind eye, we assign for him a shaitan to be his companion. And in that other verse, أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. Shaitan, if it's not going to be an eternal one, it is going to be base desires. So we can't take a break, and we need to make sure and we're doing our muhasabah, watching over ourselves on a daily basis. What about shaitan? Well, the waswas that he does is all he can do. When he puts something into our minds, it's not our fault. We are not be punished for the fact that an evil thought came to our mind. That wasn't in our control. So then what is in our control? What is in our control is how much we entertain that thought. He puts our mind of disobeying Allah shahwa, through our desires, or through our anger, retaliating against someone or something. At that point, if we're able to, that's muraqabah. If we catch it and say, you have no place here, and we are able to throw it out, we have been successful. If we start entertaining it, so how, and we start strategizing of how we're going to commit that act, even if we don't commit that act, we are allowing shaitan to penetrate within our. And so, how is it that we keep that out? Muraqabah and muhasabah is one. The Quran is number two. You see, the solutions are very few. We don't need 100,000 solutions. Solutions back down to the same thing. If we are constantly reading the Quran on a daily basis, those reminders are going to be shouting back. The whole world shouting one way, the Quran will shout a different way. How else? Company of people who are going to remind us of Allah. We go to those things where we are going to be reminded of Allah. We don't associate with people who are taking us away from Allah as our primary association. Finally, how is it that we are going to resist against shayateen al-ins? We have to be smart. We have to make sure we are not naive to say, oh, everybody's good, they're just making mistakes. No, there is an evil out there. There are such a thing called bad people. We have to recognize their strategies. We have to know what their strategies are. We have to be careful about what we expose ourselves to, what we allow our kids to be exposed to. We need to work as a team, like we said yesterday, and not try and make this journey alone. If I am having trouble, if I am having issues with tarbiyah, if I am going through a challenge, my child is going through something right now which I don't know how to tackle, it's not something to be embarrassed about, to go to somebody and say, how do I go about this? Work together. People who have the same aged children, you can work together, share ideas, see what the children are going through, preempt what your child is going to go through next, and come up with solutions together. Finally, we say that we need to increase our knowledge of Islam. We need to increase our knowledge of Islam and take a reality check. And this is very important, that we need to assess how much of my Islam has come to me from the right sources and how much of it has come to me from the society. Today, when we talk about shayateen al-ins, we are seeing that they are trying to feed us Islam, their own version of Islam. We need to be smart. We need to check. Are we going to the right sources to learn our Islam? Are we taking concepts from the outside world, from those who are not with Islam, but they are trying to teach us what our Islam is supposed to be? I end with the words of Lady Fatima alayha salam, where she said, within these 3 months, Islam has gone so off track. Can you imagine now, 1400 years later, how off track Islam has gone? And so we need to be careful. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the strength to recognize what these forces are that are obstacles on our journey, and give us the strength to overcome these obstacles. Please recite the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And another loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. The words of Imam Hussein alayhi salam on the night of Ashura to his companions and to the Ahlul Bayt. إني لا أعلم أصحابا أولى ولا خيرا من أصحابي. I do not know of any companions more loyal and better than my companions. ولا أهل بيت أبر ولا أوصل من أهل بيتي. And no household more righteous and more committed than my household. فجزاكم الله عني جميعا خيرا. So may Allah reward you the best of rewards. On the day of Ashura, we see many sacrifices were given. Sacrifices were brought from those who were not even there on the day of Ashura. We see, for example, Amir al-Mu'mineen is not there on the day of Ashura, but he has sent his Abbas. We see that Imam Hassan alayhi salam, he's not there on Ashura, but he has sent his Qasim. Lady Zainab is not fighting on the battlefield, but she has also sent her sacrifices. But today we want to remember the sacrifice of Hussein, the youthful son who has been trained by the Imam. We want to see the sacrifice of Hussein himself today. We know that on the way to Karbala, Imam Hussein alayhi salam is riding on his back, on the back of his horse. And he is feeling tired and he has a short nap. And when he wakes up, he starts saying, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. 2 or 3 times he says this. And Ali Akbar goes to him and says to him, Oh my father, why are you reciting these words of going back to Allah? He says to him, My dear son, I fell asleep just now and I had a dream. In my dream, I saw a vision that as we were going and moving forward, a rider is coming towards us and telling me that these riders are moving forward, this caravan is moving forward, but death is fast approaching. He said, I understood from this that these were our spirits telling us that we are soon going to reach the end of our lives. Ali Akbar, who has been done tarbiyah of by none Hussein himself, what does he reply? He says to Hussein alayhi salam, Alasna ala al-haq. Ali Akbar is not concerned about anything else, whether in the dunya or in the akhirah. Are we on the right? This is all that matters, O my father. The Imam replies, Bala, yes, we are on the right. He says, then it doesn't matter whether we die, whether we go towards death or death comes towards us. This is Ali al-Akbar. We are told that on the day of Ashura, the companions made a pledge between themselves that it would not be right for any of Hashim to be killed still alive. And so each of the companions is ready to make a sacrifice for Hussein alayhi salam before any of the Banu Hashim enter the. But there comes a time when the companions are no longer there. There comes a time when Burair is no longer beside Hussein. Have given their lives. So they said, 1,000 times if we were resurrected, we will give our life for you. But they are no longer. Banu Hashim look at each other, bidding farewell to each other. They hug each other, start saying things like this, that we will see you of the paradise, inshallah. But the first of the Banu, the first to go and give his life that from the Ahlul Bayt is none other than Ali al-Akbar. He is the sacrifice of Imam Hussein. He comes to Imam Hussein and says, "Oh Father, we have permission to go." Imam Hussein does not hesitate. How can he hesitate? His sacrifice. He cannot be hesitant in the eyes of Allah, and he gives him permission. But then he said, نظر إليه آيس منه أرخى عينه وبكى. Then he looked at him with a look. Tears were flowing from his eyes and he was weeping. Yes, he has given straight away, but this is his youthful son. Can you imagine your son whom you have invested everything in? You have spent your whole life for him. This is not just any son. This is the son that resembles Rasulullah. This is the son that has been put into so much by Hussein alayhi salam. Is now going to meet his death before his very own eyes. No resort but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He looks up at the sky and he says, Allahumma ashhad baraza ilayhi ghulaman ashbahu an-nasi khalqan wa khalqan wa mantiqan rasulik. Allah, bear witness that has gone forth to them a young man who models your prophet in his features, his character, and in his speech. وَكُنَّا إِذَا اشْتَقْنَا إِلَى نَبِيِّكَ نَظَرْنَا إِلَيْهِ. Whenever we desired to look at your prophet, we would look at him. This is the man who is going out in front of the eyes of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Imam Hussein then turns to Umar Sa'ad and he looks at him and he says to him, "Oh Umar Sa'ad, may Allah cut off your progeny the way you're cutting off my progeny." Ali Akbar enters the battlefield with his battle cry saying, "Ana Ali ibn al-Hussein ibn Ali, nahnu wa baylahi awla bin." I am Ali, the son of Hussein, the son of Ali. By the house of Allah, closer to the Nabi. أضرب بالسيف أحامي عن أبي ضرب غلام هاشمي قرشي. I shall strike with my sword to defend my father, the strike of a Hashimi, a Qurashi. Ali Akbar alayhi salam fights off many in the battlefield. We do not know the exact number, but he is fighting and he is in the battlefield for a very long time. But soon we see that Ali al-Akbar is returning back to the camp. What has happened? He comes to the Imam alayhi salam. He says to him, "Oh my father, the thirst is killing me. Oh my father, the heaviness of my armor is making me lose my strength. Can I just have a sip of water?" He is not asking for his whole life. Maybe he has never asked anything from Imam Hussein. Drink of water, not able to give him any. That Al-Akbar can find some. But then he says to him, "O Ali al-Akbar, O my dear son, for a while, for verily soon you will be greeted by Father Muhammad Rasulullah. He will give you a cup to drink from. After that, you will not feel thirsty." Ali Akbar to the battlefield and fighting bravely. A fierce battle ensues until this man by the name of Munqidh, he cries out a statement and says, "May the sins of the Arabs be on my shoulders." His mother him. He's waiting for Ali al-Akbar. The Ali Akbar is fighting and he waits for Ali Akbar to pass by. He has kept his spear on the ready. As soon as Ali Akbar is passing, he hurls it. Ali Akbar is wounded. There's coming out of his body. Some of the reports say trickles onto his horn. The blood trickles onto his eye. The whole thing confused and back to the camp and into the enemy. Each of the now is striking on Ali. They are He goes out to his father. "Ya Abata minni salam. Hada jaddi Allah. Salam. Oh Father, may my salam on you. This is my father who is sending you." And he is saying towards us. Eventually, Imam Hussein comes to the battle, but the march, there is so much, Imam Hussein can barely withstand. He puts his cheek on the cheek of Ali Akbar and he shouts out, "Qatala man, qataluk. May Allah kill the people who killed you. أجرأهم على الله وعلى انتهاك الرسول." Defied Allah, did the trust of His Messenger. على بعدك العفو. What is this world after? The sacrifice of Hussein, he found you on the plains in so much pain. You were quenched, Rasul and Nabi, Father, to join swiftly. Lillah wa inna raji'un. يعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلبون. We pray to Allah to help us transform our mourn during these 10 days. We ask Him to give us the strength to recognize the dunya and the akhirah so that we to maximize the dunya for the sake of our akhirah. We ask Him to give us keys that we need to help us on this journey and to give us the basir, understanding, recognizing and acting upon the different forces that are against us on this journey. We pray for the reappearance of our holy Imam Sahib al-Zaman alayhi salam, that we are the ones who can be along his side. We pray for the world. Anything good that has come to you from Allah, the thawab of these majalis, to the anbiya, the awsiya, the shuhada, to our teachers, to our parents, to our families, and to all those who have upon us. Let us recite Surah Al-Mubarak al-Fatiha for the Muharram.